Hello, History and Heritage Explorers. In this next series of videos, we're going to be exploring some of the sites related to the American Revolutionary War, as well as some of the lives of our nation's founding fathers. So sit back and enjoy. Hello, History and Heritage Explorers. In today's video, we will be traveling up to Massachusetts to learn about the battles of Lexington and Concord. These battles were fought on April the 19th, 1775, and are pivotal events that helped shape American history. These battles marked the beginning of the American Revolutionary War, igniting a flame of open rebellion against the British rule that would ultimately lead to the birth of a new nation. In this video, we will learn about some of the key participants, as well as the significant events leading up to and the consequences of the battles of Lexington and Concord. In the 1770s, tensions between American colonists and the British Crown were escalating and would soon reach a boiling point. Discontent and anger grew with British policies for years, including the infamous Stamp Act in 1765, the Townshend Acts in 1767 and 1768, and the Tea Act in 1773. These acts imposed taxes on the colonies without their consent or representation in the British Parliament from the colonies. Additionally, the presence of British troops and their harsh treatment of the colonists, as well as the killing of 11-year-old Christopher Cedar by a customs officer and British loyalist named Ebenezer Richardson on February 22, 1770, and the Boston Massacre 11 days later, where 5 colonists were shot and killed by British redcoats, further exacerbated the situation. Some American colonists were plotting and seeking independence from British rule, a treasonous proposition, but one that men like Sam Adams and the Sons of Liberty were willing to take. In 1774, Thomas Gage was appointed the Royal Governor of Massachusetts and was given the task of stamping out the rising unrest in the colonies. Gage soon drafted a new series of laws called the Coercive Act, which were intended to punish the colonists for acts of defiance against the king. These new laws would soon be known in America simply as the Intolerable Acts because they were perceived by most of the colonists as being too cruel and severe. Gage was facing rebellion and underestimated the anger, courage, determination, and thirst for independence of the colonists. These factors set the stage for the confrontations in Lexington and Concord. On the night of April 18, 1775, British forces under the command of General Thomas Gage received intelligence about rebel military supplies hidden in Concord, Massachusetts. Gage ordered a detachment of approximately 700 British soldiers, also known as the Redcoats, to march from Boston to Concord. These troops, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith, were tasked with seizing and destroying all colonial military supplies, as well as arresting any of the Patriot leaders found. American patriot Paul Revere had worked out a plan with the sexton of Boston's Old North Church, Robert Newman, to warn of the impending British operations. Newman was to set lanterns in the steeple of the Old North Church to alert the colonists in Charlestown, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Late in the evening on April 18th, Robert Newman and another man named John Pulling quietly entered the Old North Church and climbed to the top of the church's bell tower. There they hung 2 lanterns near the windows, then made their escape into the night. This signal warned Revere that a detachment of the British Army was crossing the Charles River and was heading west towards the towns of Lexington and Concord. Revere and a man named William Dawes sprang into action to spread the warning. Though it soon became known as Paul Revere's Midnight Ride, both men rode that night, covering different routes. They alerted militia companies and towns along the way to Lexington and Concord to warn Sam Adams and John Hancock about the impending British arrival. In response to the warning, local militias known as the Minutemen began to muster in Lexington and Concord. Around 70 of these militiamen gathered on the Lexington Green, led by Captain John Parker, to confront these British troops and to protect their weapon stash. It is said that Captain Parker told his troops to stand your ground, don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have war, let it begin here. It was just before dawn on April the 19th when about 700 British troops reached Lexington, where they first encountered the American militia. Both sides were on edge, and as tensions rose, a shot was fired, subsequently leading to a skirmish between the British soldiers and the Minutemen. The Redcoats greatly outnumbered the Americans, and in this brief skirmish, 8 Americans were killed and 10 were wounded. Only 1 British soldier was slightly wounded in this engagement. After the altercation in Lexington, the British continued their march towards Concord, where they intended to seize the colonial weapons and supplies stored there. Upon reaching Concord, however, they would encounter a larger force of American militiamen, numbering around 400 who had flooded in from the surrounding towns. The Americans engaged the British forces, who were searching for the hidden weapons caches throughout Concord. As the British faced increasing resistance, they fell back towards the North Bridge, where a larger confrontation ensued. In a short but intense battle at the North Bridge, the American Minutemen successfully engaged the British troops, causing them to retreat back to Boston. As the British retreated from Concord, they faced constant harassment from the American militias, whose numbers had now swelled to over 3,000. The Minutemen used the tactics of guerrilla warfare, attacking from behind cover, then moving on. The Minutemen inflicted significant casualties on the British troops, slowing up their retreat, and in the end, the Patriot militias lost only 45 men killed, 39 wounded, and 5 missing, while the British would have 73 Redcoats killed, 174 wounded, and 53 missing. The militiamen's resistance against the British troops demonstrated the colonists' determination to fight for their rights and independence, igniting a wave of patriotism and resistance throughout the American colonies. These battles would lead to the formation of a unified Continental Army that would be led by a man named George Washington. The battles of Lexington and Concord were critical events in American history, symbolizing the start of the American Revolutionary War and the colonists' fight for independence from British rule and the creation of what would become the United States of America. To learn more about the battles of Lexington and Concord, stop by your school or local public library or check the description box for links to the Minuteman National Historic Park. Please share and subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, thank you from the History and Heritage Explorers. Until next time, keep on exploring.